Hey listeners, last year was our 15th year of the best in food storytelling. As we head into 2025, we're kicking off a contest in collaboration with the podcast series Feast and Harmony and Sixth Man, where you have the opportunity to win a 4-night cruise for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, a food, wine, and spirits festival at sea. When you donate to HRN, you'll be entered for the chance to win a porthole cabin for 2 on Chefs Making Waves, sailing May 5th through 9th, 2025, from Miami to Cozumel, Mexico on Norwegian Gem. You'll also support another year of great food storytelling with a portion of your donation going toward disaster relief for the food and beverage communities within Western North Carolina and Southern California. This cruise is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for culinary adventurers, featuring top celebrity chefs including Jonathan Waxman, Antonio Lafaso, Robert Irvine, and many, many more. There's a myriad of experiences such as restaurant takeovers, live food and mixology demos, themed parties, and more. To enter your chance to win, please visit heritageradionetwork.org/cruise. Terms and conditions apply. You must be 21 or over to enter. That's heritageradionetwork.org/cruise.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. We've been making cheese in Wisconsin since before we were even a state, which may be one reason why we win so many awards for it. It's what happens when a whole state dreams in cheese. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome to Cutting the Curd, listeners. This is Jessica. Before anything, let me give you some great opportunity information. It is March, and American Cheese Education Foundation has several scholarships available for attending this year's American Cheese Society Conference in Sacramento, California. The deadline to apply is March 31st. There's a mixture of full and partial scholarships available that prioritize first-time attendees and first-time applicants, though they review all applications and they will award scholarships to as many people as they can. Visit cheesesociety.org/conference/scholarships. The Daphne Zepos Teaching Endowment, they also have a bunch of things going on. You can check out the Research Award application, which is now open March 1st, and then the deadline is March 31st. Visit dzte.org for more information and also to learn about the Teaching Award, which will be open shortly. Last but not least, the Anne Saxelby Legacy Funds 2025 apprenticeship application is now open. I had the pleasure of having Christina Graber last season as a guest to talk about ASLF. And if you'd like to learn more about the apprenticeship experience, please listen to that episode of Cutting the Curd and visit AnneSaxelbyLegacyFund.org to apply. So now, turning our attention to my wonderful guests that are joining us for this episode, I am so happy to welcome both Jesse and Sarit Werner. They're both from Plymouth Artisan Cheese Company based in Plymouth, Vermont. They make cheddar with a recipe that dates back to 1890. The company attracts fans of history and cheese alike as they are open to the public year-round. And I'm so excited because Jesse, the cheesemaker and owner of Plymouth Cheese, and Sarit, in charge of all things branding and marketing, are here to talk about the whole story, the history, the current events at Plymouth, and most importantly, the cheese. Welcome to Cutting the Curd.
Thank you. Thank you.
So 1890 is a long time ago. So you describe revising the brand as a bit of an archaeology project. So I don't know if one of you wants to talk a little bit about that. Fill us in on that origin story of Plymouth cheese.
Yeah, I mean, it is a deep dive into Vermont and cheesemaking history. It's a total history project. And that's like kind of one of the things that drew me to cheese in the first place. It's like a great method to learn about all kinds of different things. So
it's so true.
It was right. I mean, you get to learn about like the history, the traditions, like why is the cheese made this way? what contributes to that. And like, it's always very interesting. So it's like a view into like the culture of the place and like, the people. So, I mean, this is like Vermont's oldest cheddar factory. This is like the time when Vermont had transitioned away from having sheep mainly to like moving to dairy cattle as the main agricultural industry. It was before refrigeration and trucking. So there was a surplus of milk, and they decided to start this cheese factory to make a very perishable product, basically last longer and be able to market it and sell it in a more populated area. It's Plymouth cheese. It comes from the time when the product was like named for the place it was made. And each little town had a cheese factory. They all made it slightly different. And it was, highly perishable milk before trucking, before refrigeration. So a lot of cheese factories popped up to be able to, preserve this, make a product that could last and could be sold.
And was it always cheddar?
Yeah, it was always cheddar. It was always a waxed cheddar. They called it like a paraffin, a waxed cheddar. And it used to be really big 40-pound wheels. We still make big wheels, but we kind of shrunk it down. Mostly our size is the like 8-ounce wax block these days. That's kind of what the majority of what we do.
And there was some presidential history to the origin story of Plymouth cheese, correct?
Yeah, it was started by the Coolidge family in 1890. It's Calvin Coolidge's father was a dairy farmer in Plymouth, Vermont, and along with 4 other farms, they built the cheese factory. And they hired a cheesemaker with a good reputation, and they started making cheese.
And the images that I've seen online of Plymouth, and I did get the chance to drive through there one day on my way to visit another cheesemaker for work. And you can, it's a little bit of nothing, as my grandmother would say, like you blink, you miss it in a way. And now that I'm more aware of the story and the history, it's incredible when you see images that it's really unchanged since 1890. You mentioned the only real thing that's different is that it's paved now.
Yeah. Basically, we have a picture from the 1800s, late 1800s, and it's got all the same landmarks. It looks the same, except, the road was a dirt road back then. But, going back, it's a state historic site, so it's really well preserved. It's preserved as it was in 1923 when Coolidge was inaugurated. And it's one of the most visited state historic sites in Vermont. Also, and it's really neat actually because you get history buffs who are doing the presidential thing, and then they see that there's a cheese factory there, and that's like really neat and interesting. And then you get cheese, people interested in cheese that come by and check it out, and then they get this whole other historical, information and like Vermont history that's also really cool. So, it's very, it's like there's a bunch of stuff going on. There's a lot of interesting details that kind of coincided with the place in Vermont. Like Calvin Coolidge happened to be visiting Plymouth when Harding died. So he was actually sworn in as president, like at the site,
Wow.
A couple hundred yards from the cheese factory. And when he was president, he came back to Plymouth in the summer and basically ran the country from like above the general store.
That's crazy.
And so, we have some neat pictures, like Coolidge pictures with like holding a box of cheese. And we've got a really neat museum on the second floor of the cheese factory that's kind of like, the history of Plymouth cheese, like cheese making at Plymouth. We have some old cheese making vats that are really interesting, and some early equipment that they used to use.
So, Jesse, what is your cheese making story? How did you get into cheese making, and then how did it bring you to Plymouth?
I grew up in northern Vermont on a farm and was just loved it and always wanted to, be in Vermont and do something involved with agriculture. And in high school, I started helping a neighbor that made goat cheese in the summers. So that was kind of my first exposure to cheese making. And I just thought it was really interesting and kept learning about it. And then, after college, people were starting to like really get into it in Vermont. And there was some unique places popping up trying to do some value added things. And I started, pursuing it again and just trying to learn everything I could about it. And just through research and learning, I saw that the Plymouth cheese factory was going to come up for rent. And I talked to some people at the state of Vermont and was able to check it out and tour it and, look at it. And I came up with a proposal for them to revive the cheese factory. It had been owned by the Coolidge family right from 1890 till 2000 from 1890 until 1998. And that was when Calvin Coolidge's sons donated it to the state of Vermont to be part of the historic site. And it hadn't really operated since then. It had some stops and starts, but it was a bit defunct. And so I put together like a proposal to revive the original cheese and, get that factory going. So, it's kind of interesting. Like the site was a historic site, but, with an active cheese factory, it's a lot less, frozen in time. It actually like can embrace like these modern kind of artisanal, movements and that can like be part of it also. So
Right.
It's kind of an interesting thing.
So, Sarit, I'm going to ask you about this from a marketing perspective, because I was just thinking as Jesse was talking, when I see these very distinctive little blocks of wax covered cheddar in the store, and you have the different colors for the different flavors, the look of the cheese really stands out, and the branding has this historical feel. So can you tell us about the stencils and how you came up with some of the marketing?
So Jesse and I were friends in New York City while he was traveling to Vermont, dreaming of doing something agricultural. And then when it came time for him when he took over the cheese factory, he asked me, as a graphic artist specializing in vintage ephemera and research, I used to design graphics for apparel at Ralph Lauren. So Jesse knew that he wanted a vintage look for his antique cheese factory revival, and he asked me to do the labels. And so he came to me with this great idea of these colorful, beautiful blocks, and together we embarked on the journey of designing the labels, which was so we have a first generation label back from 2009 for the original Plymouth and the smoked. And when I first saw the cheese factory, I saw all these incredible stencils on preserved cheese vats that they used to use at the Plymouth Cheese Factory in our upstairs museum, and butter molds, and there was graphic stenciled on butter churns. It was a Vermont tradition. There was graphic inspiration everywhere, so it was very inspiring, and that definitely lent to the graphic language of our branding.
So interesting, because people collect cheese labels, and there is a whole art form to the branding of cheese, to cheeses, especially ones that have a history as deep as this one, which is really wild. I mean, 1890 again, it's like, woo. And also, I was just curious about that timeline from 1890. So there was a time period when cheese was not being made at Plymouth. That's correct?
Yeah, they closed during the Great Depression. I guess there was a milk shortage that did hit Vermont at some point. So there were some years that they were closed, and they revived it. Calvin Coolidge's son, John Coolidge, revived the cheese factory in 1960. They kind of modernized it to that time, got rid of the wooden vats, got rid of that stuff, put in some stainless steel, 1960s era, small cheese factory. And
Wow.
he ran it John Coolidge ran it from 1960 until 1998.
And when you walked in there, was it like how ready was it? Or did you have to kind of pull everything down to the studs and rebuild? Like, how was it ready to get going?
It was in okay shape. We had to do a few things, but like the bones were there, and we were using equipment that was definitely 50 years old, but like because of that, it was really well made like back then. So I mean, at this point, we've cycled through everything pretty much and replaced everything, but we got a few years out of like a cheese vat and a press, which is basically for this early operation, that's kind of like the two main things that they were doing. Yeah, so definitely some improvements, and it's one of those things. It is an antique cheese factory, so there's like continuous improvements that go on. But like looking in, like I definitely came up with a plan to get it going, and I could see the potential. It was a really interesting place, and it had a really interesting history and story, and it's a raw milk cheese. So it's one of those products that has like a really small circle. And, we buy the milk from one local farm, and you make the cheese the old fashioned way that they used to. And it's kind of like an artifact of that. And it's like an interesting study is like, was it a tastier time back then? Like, does that make a difference? And I think it does.
I'm going to say this is a good time to take a break, because when we get back, I want to really get into what the profile of a Vermont cheddar is, and I don't want us have to stop. So I'm going to say this is a good time to have a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back with more of Jesse and Sarit from Plymouth Artisan Cheese.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. There's a reason when you think of Wisconsin, you think cheese. Cheese is a huge part of Wisconsin's history and future. In Wisconsin, the state of cheese, the tradition of cheese-making excellence began 180 years ago, before Wisconsin was recognized as a state. Immigrants traveled to settle in this lush green hills of Wisconsin, bringing their cheese-making traditions with them. These storied skills, combined with the freshest milk available, created a cheese-making culture that is uniquely Wisconsin. Wisconsin's 1,200 cheesemakers, many of whom are third and fourth generation, continue to pass on old world traditions while adopting modern innovations in cheese-making craftsmanship. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
Welcome back to Cutting the Curd. This is Jessica. My guests are Jesse and Sarit Warner. This is a conversation about Plymouth Artisan Cheese. I want to pick up where we just left off about your raw milk cheddar. How would you describe the profile of Vermont cheddar and then of Plymouth cheddar within that?
Wow, that is a good question. Cheddar is such a big category.
It is.
There's so many different types within that, which is an amazing thing, and why it's like endlessly fascinating. Even within Vermont, there's so many different types and great cheddar producers. So, geez, what's the profile? People really associate Vermont cheese with kind of like strong flavored cheddar, you could say. Traditionally, it's been called sharp cheddar, which is, I'm talking on a cheese thing, right? I mean, that's like a loaded term, but like sharp cheddar is what they want when they're in Vermont. And I think that just means that the flavor is turned up a lot. So like a very flavorful cheddar, which is usually an aged cheddar. It kind of goes back to the history of the product and like what they were trying to do. Like the cheddar that they always made at Plymouth was a higher moisture cheddar. So it's very creamy. It's very smooth. It was a waxed cheese. It's one of those cheeses that you could kind of enjoy at a young age from a couple weeks old. And at a medium age, it's really good. And it just kind of keeps, getting stronger and, bigger flavor profile the longer you hold on to it.
Yeah, I wonder, Sarit, from a marketing perspective too, how do you describe Plymouth cheddar and within the context of like Vermont being such a cheese destination, so strongly associated with cheddar?
Well, for cheese purists, my favorite thing to do with Plymouth cheese is to take somebody on a tasting journey from the Farmer Fred's favorite, which is a 60-day mild, sweet cheddar. And you can really taste how young and approachable, the kids love it. You could really taste that it's very an easy, delicious, easy to eat cheese. And then you go to Plymouth, which is aged the same cheese, but it's aged for a year. And this one's much sharper and richer and with notes of a little brothy, I would say. And then 2 years later, it becomes the Hunter cheddar, which is our sharpest cheddar, which the old timers definitely love. I mean, and so taking that little journey is great. And then Jesse's also has all these wonderful flavors, which all kind of speak for themselves, and they're all distinctive enough to stand on their own. But Jesse makes really approachable, easy to love cheese in all the varieties.
So we met at a distributor show, and you shared with me a really interesting tidbit, because I have this thing about flavored cheese that I don't always like it. And yet it's becoming inescapable. Everybody's got flavored cheese. And you told me that, was it sage? Actually, that's not new in cheddar.
No, it's so interesting. They've always had, right, Jesse? They've always had sage at the Plymouth Cheese Factory.
Yeah. Even way back in the day, they had a sage. They did a caraway, and they had a cheese they called a pimento. That is, it's not like now a pimento cheese is like some, dip or something, but it was like some red pepper into the cheese, peppadew. I'm not sure, some red pepper in the cheese. And, that's just like, again, age old, that's history, right? It's like, the Gouda or the Gouda or Gouda, or I don't know how you say it, but like with the flavor in it back in the day,
Yeah.
I mean, have spices, have dry spices, make one variety of the cheese all the time. Like you probably want to like experiment after a little while, try some different things. And especially, it's so funny, those two types of cheese, cheddar cheese, Gouda cheese, they're so good for making and aging. Like other types of cheese, like, they can go bad after a while, but like well-made cheddar and Gouda is like, they're you're just storing them, they're even better.
That's very true. And actually the flavors, not so much now because we have flavors at our fingertips, but at that flavors when you were talking about Gouda and like cumin, and it's like how did those spices or herbs get introduced to a location that was known for making Gouda cheese? So you can get into like more of the development of global history.
It's, the story of cheese is like the story of like good history in the world. It's like the Dutch East Indies trading company, they went all over the world and they collected these amazing spices from everywhere. And they went back to the Netherlands and like, oh, there you go. Boom. All of a sudden they had access to all this stuff. The cheesemakers could like buy these spices.
So did Plymouth Cheese have records of all of this when you started investigating the company, or is there like an archive?
So yeah, it's really interesting. So in the museum, they have a copy of one of the early cheese makes, like up on the wall. So from that, we, again, trying to put the cheese back together, the recipe, so we have the process. You have your basic process, you have your times, your temperatures, and like this kind of information. We were also like really fortunate to have at the site one of the cheesemakers from 1960. The head cheesemaker still lived in Plymouth, and we would have her come down and like talk to us and try the cheeses that we were making, to say like, is the texture correct? Is the flavor correct? Like, and just like basically pick her brain on it.
Amazing.
So that was really amazing. And it's such a small town like Plymouth that like people who grew up there very often have worked at the cheese factory, and like their parents have worked and their children, so it's like you could talk to a lot of people about the cheese factory in town. They all knew something about it.
So what was their response when you kind of came in from out of town, although you were still in Vermont, but you're an outsider from Plymouth. What was their response to you taking this on?
I think it's good. It's good in Plymouth. It's very good. It's a really small town, and we're trying to like we'd always been trying to bring back some vibrancy to the historic site, and it's a really welcoming place. We got tons of samples. We give out samples. We've got a little retail store right there in the factory. And I think we definitely made some friends early on, and we've got a lot of cheese to give away to people and woo people, so that always helps. And I think people were definitely happy who'd worked there, and then I had a young lady who worked there whose grandmother had worked there, and the milk truck's back in town. Dropping off milk, and there's stuff going on.
That's
which
exciting.
is important for small towns.
Because two other cheesemakers tried to make a go of it before Jesse took it over in the early 2000s, and those didn't work out. And Jesse, with his plan and the vision and bringing back the historic cheese, he revived the original recipe and the original way they used to package the cheese in wax. And I think everybody's kind of starry-eyed that this cheese is back in circulation and is so popular. So we're really excited about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The ghosts approve. I love it.
Yeah. It's neat for people to be able to see it, like when they travel somewhere else.
Yes.
Or we get people to visit the site and they say, "Oh, I see this where I live," or even it's an interesting site. There's a couple of houses that are still owned by the Coolidge family, some descendants, and they don't live there full time. But when they come back, they visit and they say, "Oh my God, there's Plymouth cheese like in the store by their house now."
Yes. Yes.
So that's pretty cool.
So I want to talk about that very distinctive wax coating, because it really does belong to you. Right? When I see it in the store, I know exactly. I don't even need to see the front of the cheese. I know it's yours. Why wax in general? Can we talk a little bit about the role of wax? And then, is it really labor intensive? How does it fit into your process? How do you do it? It is
so labor intensive.
Yeah.
It is just, yeah. I mean, it's the most labor intensive part, but it's like really traditional Vermont wax cheddar. And that is like what we wanted to deliver, to people in Vermont and outside of Vermont. And it's just that shrinking it down to that block size, that 8-ounce size is the opportunity to give like every person a perfectly waxed, like perfect piece of Artisan, like raw milk cheddar, like wherever you are. It's the traditional package. You don't have to use plastic. If it's done well, it keeps forever, and no one else. It's so intensive that no one else really does it, and we don't want it to go away. Like it's worth it.
Do you have days where it's like, because you do have so many different flavors, where it's like, today we do the purple wax, and then on Fridays we do the red wax, and
every day.
Yeah.
Every single day. It's on the calendar and the schedule, and it's really, but it's good. It's like every step of the process is intensive, and it's a chance to do really good quality control and make sure you're like getting it right. And like everybody who contributes has a big part in it because like every part takes a lot of work. So it's like, at least at the end of the day, like, you made something, okay, you get proud of it. You could like bang your head against it if you need to, but like you made something.
How, and at what point does the cheese get coated in wax? Is it after a certain amount of aging?
Yeah.
Because does it continue to develop flavor after it's been cut and put in the wax, or is it kind of frozen in time like a cryo? Like, what happens?
No, it really keeps going. So
Wow.
like if you have a block of cheese in wax and you like, put it in the back of the fridge and keep it there more, like you're definitely aging it. Like it'll continue to do its thing.
One of the great selling points of the cheese is that it has a really long shelf life in the fridge. So all of the best by dates are a year out. But if it's in the fridge for even longer than that, it just gets sharper with age. So as long as the wax is intact and it's in the fridge, you can age a cheese. But I mean, usually it doesn't last that long in the fridge. So.
Right. Or, you buy two. You have one for now and then one for, a year from now.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about these flavors because you have so many.
My mom pulled out a block from like 3 or 4 years ago the other night.
Oh, boy.
Where, and she's just been like hoarding it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Oh yeah, and it was amazing. Yeah, I was like, oh my God, we were like, oh, right. Like, what batch was this? And like, I looked at the date. It was like, oh my God, this was years ago.
And it tasted good.
It's great.
Yeah. So can we talk about some of the flavors that you have, because you do have quite a variety, and they represent so many different influences. So can you share a little bit about the inspiration for some of these flavors and what maybe some of your personal favorites are?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, so the smoked flavor is like really, it's so traditional in Vermont to do a smoked cheese, but we use a local smokehouse. They do it over hickory. It's like a cold smoker. And that's really unique. And just that, like, not that many places do that anymore, because when you're a big size, you can't really pull it off. And when you're, so like natural smoke, I think is really like a pro, like really a neat thing. Cause like there's a lot of liquid smoke out there. So that's really interesting. We do a truffle cheese. We get truffles from Italy. They're amazing truffles. The cheese comes out, fantastic. And like, that is just like, it's so funny. It's like so market driven. People are truffle crazy. Mm-hmm. I don't know what else to say about that, but like that one is growing all the time for us. So like, great idea. I have to say, like, Sarit lived in Italy, loves everything Italian, speaks Italian, and definitely suggested the truffles. So there you go.
I was like, come on, Jesse, we need a truffle.
Yeah.
But then, but also the garlic peppercorn has been the sleeper hit of the year. That everybody's really excited about that one.
I love that one. You recommended it to me. You said, make a quesadilla with it. I did. And that's all I want to use now. It is so good.
But that's the payoff with the flavored cheeses. That right there, though, is like there's so much flavor in them. They're so versatile,
Yeah, but I think like sometimes, especially, I don't know what it is about garlic, there's like a tipping point where it starts to taste artificial. And this was just so beautiful. It just, I don't know, maybe it's because it's in the wax. I don't know, but it really was. And it melted so beautifully, which is always a bonus with cheddar. Just like, it was such a beautiful melt. And then you have a sambal.
Yeah, no, definitely. Sambal, we've been doing that one for a few years. That's based on an Indonesian relish that is like very interesting spice blend, and kind of works really well in that cheese.
Is there a flavor that you're dying to do that you haven't attempted yet, or one that maybe you'd love to do but think, I don't know, I'll keep it to myself because I don't think it'll sell?
Oh, I've got a bunch of those. I mean, I try. Yeah. I try to think more of just than myself, but like I've got so many experiments on shelves.
So we're gonna see something at some point, maybe
Oh,
the
yeah,
inner
for
workings
sure.
of your brain.
Oh, for
Right?
sure. For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're
It's
open,
that same thing, you've got to keep yourself entertained.
right? Right. Keep it interesting. You know,
Yep.
it's funny because I've been selling cheese for a really long time, and more as we move to these more consolidated markets, buyers are always looking for what's new. What's new? What do you have that's new? But I also think it's important to what's good, what's still good, what is still consistently good.
So hard. It's so hard with cheese, especially, because very often these are like long-term experiments. You're making cheddar. It takes a long time to age. And you're always trying to improve like your basic, your core products anyway. So, when you're making cheese every day. So yeah, it's like, well, what's new is like, oh, well, this cheese is better than ever,
Mm-hmm.
but like, that's tough when everyone's asking what's new. That's a tough one in cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to point out that you are open year round and you are open for visitors, as you've mentioned. So what can a visitor expect when they come to Plymouth Cheese?
Oh, they get to walk back into 1890 and, see how you used to make cheese in small batches by hand. We've got a really great little retail store inside the factory where we've got samples and we've got really good Vermont products that go with our cheese nicely. And we've got the museum upstairs, which is really cool, like a cheese-making history of Plymouth.
Yeah, it's very specific to the Plymouth Cheese Factory.
Yeah.
Including a copy of a letter from Abraham Lincoln talking about how delicious Vermont cheddar is.
Ha ha, that is very cool.
Yeah.
Wow. It is very cool, yeah.
Yeah, that's neat. And we try to be really engaging. Like you see people out there, we like talk to them about cheese making, have them ask questions. I love just like letting people ask questions. And it's definitely worth a trip. Like
if anybody wants a special tour or some special attention, they're free to email us and we can organize, we have a lot of school trips that come. We have a lot of bike tours that come. We're on a scenic route of Vermont that was voted one of the prettiest roads in Vermont. So that's where we live in an exquisite place. It's a Brigadoon. It's a place that's stuck in time. So it's, it's if people are if it's rainy, if it's an off ski day, they can come in the winter time every day, 11 to 5. In the summertime, on Wednesdays, they can see our local farmer Fred, for whom the favorite cheddar is named for, doing a demonstration for kids with sheep shearing or batting iron or milling grain. So that's very interesting. And also during the summer times, they can also take a tour on the Calvin Coolidge State Historic Site, which is a separate business from ours, but the two go hand in hand.
That's so wild. It's a little bit of something for everyone.
Yes. But yeah, we're open for self-guided tours unless you email us to organize something a little bit more special.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining me on Cutting the Curd. This was a great way for me to kick off 2025. And I really encourage everybody to visit the website. Can you give us the web address?
Sure. It's PlymouthCheese.com.
Oh, that was easy. And definitely, consider going and making a stop at Plymouth Cheese the next time you are in Vermont. And on that note, I want to wish everybody well. Thank you again for joining us. All the listeners out there, you can find us on Instagram at Cutting the Curd. You can always find us at heritageradionetwork.org and listen to us, spread the word, leave us a review. We love the love, and I'll see you guys again next time.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Cutting the Curd is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.